Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I am Aaron, and this is the Inclusive Dad podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me in exploring ways we can create a more inclusive world together. You are important, you matter, and you can make a difference. Today, my guest is Jacob Reimann. Welcome to the show.
Hi there. Good afternoon. Good morning.
Why don't you just start us off by telling me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So my name's Jacob. I'm from London in the UK, and I've had ADHD, PTSD, mental illness, a kind of long list of challenges that I've overcome, and childhood trauma, abandonment, loss, all that kind of stuff, which we can go into. And I'm just launching an online program, an online school where you can kind of learn the process that I use to heal myself. It's based on kind of lots of sort of energy work, Chinese medicine, functional health, nervous system regulation, and it's a sort of integrated process that people can follow to resolve these kind of challenges. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. What is your definition of inclusion?
Well, I think for me, inclusion is really kind of understanding that everybody, most people have something that they find challenging, maybe about themselves or about their, behavior, or about just how they interact with other people, perhaps, and it might be something that you've just sort of adapted to and said, well, that's just how I am, which is of course fantastic. But I think for a lot of people that don't have an experience of perhaps PTSD or neurodiversity or mental illness, it could be quite hard to. I think it could be quite hard to have the sort of compassion for the other person. That they're not doing it because they want to, or that they're not as clever, or they're not doing it because there's some kind of choice in the matter. That neurodiversity, for example, is something that we experience because that's just a symptom of something else potentially. And I think that when people sort of recognize that and show a bit more compassion and understanding for others, then everything's a lot easier.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, I'm really excited about talking with you today, as I talked about before we
Yeah.
started recording. But it just so I have a daughter. Her name's Cecilia. She's 22. She has
Yeah.
been diagnosed with cerebral palsy and epilepsy.
Right.
And I don't remember a time where I was hoping that she would be like uh, healed completely. I guess that's not.
Right.
Thinking back, she had she had 90-minute grand mal seizures when she was little. So as a
Right.
parent, yeah, I want that part healed so she can. That's not fun to watch happen to
Yeah.
her. It's not good for her.
Sure.
So there are pieces probably that I thought about wanting her healed, but I never really, maybe for a long term, didn't think about it. I'm kind of
Mm-hmm.
processing this out loud, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just um, you talk about in your stuff that I read and looked at your website about you being able to like heal your ADHD and other things. Do you want to maybe go into that a little bit? I'm just kind of the angle I've kind of coming from, like I said, is when I've heard most people talk about ADHD or dyslexia, there's not a
Mm.
lot of discussion about, hey, I want to get this healed. It's more about like I have this and how can I best live my life and manage it. So can you
Sure.
maybe talk a little bit about how you got to that point of like, I want to try to,
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
on.
Well, yeah, of course. So obviously, things like cerebral palsy and these kind of things are more kind of developmental, kind of
Yep.
genetic, areas
Yep.
but things like in my experience, with myself and with my private clients, things like ADHD and dyslexia, and obviously things like PTSD, obviously post-traumatic stress disorder, they are in a large, for a large part of it, issues with the nervous system, right?
Okay.
And issues where the nervous system is kind of stuck in various kind of loops, as I like to call it, without, we can get into the detail. And it basically means that, due to, certain stimuli. So, for example, the clients I've had, and obviously healed myself. Let's take so ADHD and dyslexia, for example, right? So with both of these, what's present is what are called nervous system reflexes that should have been turned off in kind of early childhood, but which remain active. Okay. And so obviously a nervous system reflex is things like, if you touch a hot plate, you instinctively withdraw. And we have things like, the gag reflex, or the reflex to swallow, all these kind of things which we kind of just need to survive and live, but we don't need to, we don't need to remember to swallow, right? We don't need to kind of think to withdraw our hand from a hot flame. We just do it because we're wired to do that. And in early childhood, from conception to kind of, a few years after birth, there are certain reflexes that we need for a short amount of time. For example, when we're learning to crawl, or when we have to wiggle out of the womb, or when we have to, learn how to coordinate our eye, eye and arm movements, and coordinate our, legs and arms. So all these are things that we initially, there's a sort of program in the nervous system that is running, that is active, and then from doing that we then learn to do that, and then when we've learned how to do it, or another reflex takes over, then that reflex is turned off because so for example, there's a reflex called the spinal galant reflex that is active when when the lower end of your spine is stimulated, and that's one of the reflexes that we use to wiggle out of the womb, right? So we're in a tight space. Our lower spine gets stimulated because of the we're in the passage, and then that makes us kind of wiggle, right? But for some, for reasons like trauma, C-sections, things like not crawling for long enough as a kid, or being kept on our backs, or from trauma, these reflexes can stay active, and they can contribute to things like dyslexia and ADHD, because, which means that we're trying to kind of fight with our nervous system. So a few other reflexes are stimulated by when we just move our head up and down or sideways. Our body wants to, respond to those movements of the head, and actually, our arms want to move, or we want to wiggle, or move, sit up, or stand up, or whatever that is. And so when, in terms of healing things like ADHD and dyslexia, there's a few other things which I'll go into. Then it's really about understanding, well, are any of these nervous system patterns still active when they shouldn't be? Right. Okay. And if they are, well, which ones are they? Okay. And we can do tests on the body to find out, well, which of these are active, or which combinations are active, and what triggers them. And then, well, how can we, teach the body to kind of turn them off again, essentially. Okay. So in terms of the nervous system, that's one big area of ADHD and dyslexia. It's not the the whole picture, and obviously in PTSD as well. So that's another sort of trauma-based, where trauma is affecting the nervous system, and so there are sort of two areas. So if the nervous system is stuck in various loops due to developmental things like not crawling for long enough, being kept on your back, and a few other things, that's one thing where we can kind of do the exercises we need so the nervous system goes through enough of those cycles that it didn't do in early childhood to turn them off. And secondly, if there's some kind of trauma involved, then we can work out which one of those it is, and then there's a process that I've used from involving kind of breath work and energy work from sort of Chinese kind of healing and spiritual practices, where we can kind of essentially kind of suck the trauma out of our nervous system. It's not very pleasant, but it's a way we can actually get all those unresolved, the energy of all those unresolved emotions, all the terror and whatever trauma created that traumatic sort of response in you, to get everything out of your system so it can just be in peace. So that's one part of it, and obviously with things like ADHD, another part of it is things like diet and nutrition and vitamins and minerals to get your dopamine and adrenaline levels stable, gut health and that whole kind of picture as well. So it's really about understanding, well, what's causing those symptoms for you, and then for whatever's active for you, what do we need to do to kind of work through that and resolve it, so that you're actually at peace in yourself.
Yeah, thanks for the explanation. I appreciate it.
Great.
What, I guess, what led you to want to like heal yourself from that and not just kind of manage it?
Well, because basically, because I had really traumatic childhood, so for many years I just kind of blanked it out, and so I was kind of I had all these things like dyslexia, ADHD, but I never really thought. I just thought that was who I was, and it never really occurred to me that it wasn't, that maybe other people didn't have it. It just didn't occur to me. If you just had something since you can remember, you just adapt to it, right? And you just kind of don't really. And then at a certain time in my life, I became really mentally ill, and everything just started coming out. It's like my psyche just got to a point where it was like, well, I just need to get rid of all this stuff, right? Sure. So then I went through a period of mental illness where everything just that was really challenging as well. So I just got to a point where I was just like, wow, I'm really not well. What do I do about this? Because I was way beyond kind of adapting to it or just kind of learning to live with it, because it was just it was beyond that point. I was just hallucinating and it was really challenging. So I just basically said, right, well, what do I do about this? So I just started on this journey of kind of working out, well, what do I do? Because I'd been healing others and myself before that, so I'd already had some tools. Sure. So I just through a bit of trial and error, I just kind of worked out, okay, well, where is this in me that's causing my symptoms? What is this madness that's displaying as mental illness? And then I just kind of learn how to just start kind of with the breath and the sort of energy practices that come from sort of Chinese medicine, from Taoism, to kind of identify, well, where is it in me, and then how to just start getting it out. So that's really essentially what I needed to go through to heal myself. And obviously with all the nervous system stuff and all, I was in a real kind of mess. So I just like, okay, well, how do I get through this? And then obviously, having spoken to a lot of people, and I know a lot of other people have various challenges. It could be trauma, depression, ADHD, dyslexia. So how do I create a process that people can kind of follow in easy steps for themselves, with the right guidance? So where would you start if you had, for example, dyslexia? So in addition to the nervous system things I've talked about, a lot of people in my experience with dyslexia have certain structural things, so they can have like really jaw tension, or the skull can be have tension, like sort of cranial pressure, or they can have so they can be structurally quite out of balance and tense, and that can cause a lot of kind of tension and pressure adds to the, if you've got those nervous system things, it can, cause a lot of challenges with reading, writing, remembering things. And then you have these symptoms, which are then, quite rightly described as dyslexia, but it's like, yeah, but what is it? Because it's not like cerebral palsy, for example, which is like a genetic developmental thing. It's not something you can really medicate very well. Obviously, with ADHD, there's medication which helps, but that doesn't sort of solve the problem. So it just got me really sort of fascinated about how do you sort of show people how they can find out for themselves what the problem is, and then teach them a process where they can start to kind of go through these issues that they have one by one. Yeah.
In the UK where you live, are people more open to like alternative medicines? I know in the US, like at least where I'm in Midwestern, I'm in Minnesota, the middle of the country, Midwestern. I mean, there are people that, are support alternatives types of like healing or medicine, but I mean, it's not a huge chunk of the population, I don't think.
There are, I think, so there are people that, so I think there's two types of people. There are one that are quite open to it. They may be, and loads of people maybe do yoga, they might meditate, they might, use herbs, or they might, just be, understand that, medication is just one part of the picture, right?
Right.
Obviously, what's, I suppose, more important is, good diet, sleep, friendship, being happy with what you're doing in your life, all the kind of basic things, which there's no real argument about that, right? I mean, we all understand that that's really important. And then there's the people that have kind of tried everything and they're still not well, and then they're on this, on a range of medications, which may combined make them worse. And I know there's a lot of interest now, for example, in in psychiatry, that long-term use of psychiatric medication can actually be really harmful for you, and getting off psychiatric medications can be very harmful, as challenging if you don't work with a medical professional to do that. So I think people have just got to the point where they're like, okay, well, I've got ADHD. Okay, fine. I find, focusing really challenging, or, whatever symptoms you may have. But what is it? Why do I have this? And what can I do about it? Because it's, in my experience, in the people I've spoken to and that I work with, it's just really, it just takes so much energy. It takes so much of your life where you're constantly trying to kind of manage your symptoms, or do some hacks that will get you to focus, or whatever. It's just really tiring, and you just want to be able to not have to do that all the time, and put your energy into something more, I don't know, productive, creative, or whatever it might be, or just to be at peace and just not have to kind of fidget and keep on doing things, So I think. Sure. I think there's two kinds of people. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. You might have talked about this a little bit, but how can parents help their child to heal from ADHD or dyslexia? What are some things parents can do just to help with their kids?
Well, I think that there's obviously the kind of quick wins. So things like making sure their diet is low in inflammatory foods, so high carbohydrate, lots of sugar, soda, Coke, all that stuff. Diet Coke, for example, things like aspartame and monosodium glutamate in food, they can really overstimulate the brain if you have too much of it. So you need to basically get your diet to simplify your diet to a sort of home cooked, balanced diet, not too many carbs, proteins, fats, healthy fats, to sort of, get the gut healthy, right, so that the brain can kind of, function as well as possible. And then obviously, look at other things, so if so a lot of people I speak to, when I say, ADHD can be caused by some reflexes due to perhaps not crawling for long enough as a child. And somebody I spoke to was like, oh yeah, I didn't crawl at all. I was just lying on my back, and then I just started walking. And that's just I remember my mum telling me, or another person that I had with ADHD, we were talking about birth trauma, and he was like, oh yeah, I had terrible birth trauma. I was, I had to get a forceps delivery, and so everyone I speak to or that I work with immediately can connect and say, oh yeah, that happened to me, or yeah, I remember my mum telling me that
Sure.
that's how I started walking or crawling, or it was delayed, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So it's really sort of think about the history of the child, and if that sort of resonates with you, then find an occupational therapist. Obviously get in touch with me. I'm launching this program, or just find someone that is has experience in sort of these primitive reflexes. A lot of people, a lot of healers or occupational therapists or pediatric doctors, will know how to check for these things, right?
Sure.
So at least then you'll know, oh, okay, I've got a symmetric tonic neck reflex active, and I've had it checked out, and then it's like, what do you do with it? And there's people that can help you with that, or obviously get in touch. So that's what I would suggest. Yeah,
That's great. So I'm just curious if, let's say I, as a child, didn't crawl and that reflex is still there, do you just then crawl for a while to get over that, or is that not how you
so basically there are, depending on there's a few factors, but basically there's about 6 or 7 exercises that you can do, and basically you kind of learn to work with your body to kind of get the right one that you need, and then you basically do those exercises. It could be a combination of exercises to over a period of sort of weeks and months, to kind of reintegrate those reflexes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's all interesting.
Yeah.
Why do some people with trauma experience mental illness and others don't?
That's a very good question, and I've been thinking a lot about it. So I think that there's a few factors. So I think there's the metabolic side of things. So I think people with with inflammation can be more susceptible to mental illness. Vitamin mineral deficiencies, poor gut health. In my experience, I think gut health was important. I think generational trauma can play a role. So obviously my father, who caused a lot of my problems in early childhood, he had a terrible childhood as well, and I think a lot of some of that trauma can be inherited, either in the kind of in the sort of genetic inheritance, sort of energetic inheritance. And obviously his behavior was of somebody that was already traumatized. And so I think it's a sort of, combination of factors that cause that. Yeah, but it's a really good question. I don't quite have a sort of straight answer for you, but yeah. I know that there's quite a few factors that can contribute to sort of mental illness. Yeah, and having experienced it myself, I'm just like, for me, it was the generational trauma. There was a lot of grief, a lot of unresolved emotions, and they're all just like kind of bundled up inside. I didn't have a very good gut health. I ate quite a lot of high carb diet, so I got pre-diabetes. I'm not saying it's a causal factor, but I think when the brain has just got all these unresolved emotions and trauma, and there's inflammation, and your guts aren't kind of functioning properly, and there's potentially things rotting there and going into your brain. So I think it can create vitamin mineral deficiencies. It can create a kind of perfect storm,
right,
where where you're just, where you have trouble, where you have problems. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This is all very interesting. Thank you so much.
But I think the main point is that whatever situation, whatever your life situation is,
Yeah.
and I had a really challenging life situation. I know there are a lot of people that had, terrible, years of, I don't know, years of sexual abuse or
Yeah.
much worse than I had, for example. So it's not really about, it's not about comparing yourself. It's just saying, well, whatever my experience is now, however challenging they are, that there's a sort of step-by-step process that you can follow to start getting out of it. And as I said, it's about fixing your physical health, getting your, any unresolved trauma or unresolved emotions. I mean, I think with trauma, for example, what I was always really kind of amazed at is how much anger I hadn't, for example, processed. How much anger and hatred I was just kind of carrying, in addition to the sort of all the fear and the shame and everything. But the amount of anger I hadn't even realized I had, and then it just created this perfect storm of being in a really challenging situation. So I think it's just a question of, you just need to work through it, and I think what really kind of what really helped, what helped me start my journey was when I started doing breath work, when I started getting back into my body, because I think I'd been very shut off from myself, kind of depersonalized and just kind of all shut down. And I remember my first breathwork session. It was at this festival, and it was working with partners, and we were just basically synchronizing our breathing, and there was a gong, and this guy was and it was just kind of a rhythmic kind of ritual thing. And I just remember I just had this kind of my first release, and I was just really like amazed. I was just like I was just kind of on the floor, just kind of shaking and groaning, and it was the first time that it had just kind of come out, and that was like a few years ago. So there's been a lot of that, and a lot of shaking, and it's like when animals are stressed, they just shake, right? Well, we kind of we don't until we have to, and so then it just sort of start coming out. So it's a really sort of physical, it's a really physical thing sometimes that we just need to allow to happen. Yeah.
What is one tip that you can share today to help the listeners be more inclusive? So just something anybody can start doing today to be more inclusive.
I think what I would suggest is coming back to my thing about inclusion and compassion. I think what a lot of people can do is start to learn how to kind of breathe deeply into their lower belly, and start putting their attention there, because it stops you being as reactive. So if somebody is having if somebody's neurodivergent, or they're having some trouble with something, I think it's quite easy to kind of react quite quickly to that in a kind of judgmental way, and saying, oh, well, Christ, it's not very difficult to do that. What's wrong with you, or why can't you blah, blah, blah. So I think, if you sort of get into your body, get into your lower, get into your breath, and be more present in yourself, I think you can start to get more compassion and understanding for other people, which I think is the sort of start of inclusion, right? And then obviously there's understanding other people's challenges and how to maybe adapt the environment to that, or all the kind of specific things. But I think that's something that everyone can do for themselves, to kind of give everyone that space to see how the processes can be improved.
That's great. Do you want to share a little bit of where the best place is for everybody to connect with you, and then maybe just talk a little bit about the coach or your program you got launching here
of course.
that'll be up?
So the website will be ready from Tuesday, but it's innerfreedom.world, and you can basically, watch. There's a presentation, and you can find out about the healing program, and you can kind of learn how to do everything that I've talked about in a kind of weekly, easy to follow process.
Sure.
So whatever your life situation, you can start to get on that healing journey quite quickly. Yeah.
And that's it's all virtual, and anybody anywhere in
Yeah,
the
so
world can do
it's
it.
virtual, and then there's like group sessions, group healing
Okay.
sessions, Q&As, all kinds of different stuff. Partner work. So yeah, it's like a sort of it's a fantastic thing to get involved in. Yeah.
Awesome. Ready for the final question?
Yeah.
You like spam lunch meat? Yes or no?
Yes.
That was quick. Wow. Yeah, I live near Austin, Minnesota, where they make spam and where the spam museum is located. So if you want to visit the spam museum, you got to come to southern Minnesota.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sold.
You're sold. Yeah, apparently in the UK, it's kind of a big thing. There's a couple that came from over there and actually got married in the spam museum. I think it was in the news and all that stuff.
I think it was. I think it was really popular in the war,
Oh, yep,
spam.
yep, it
And I
was.
think you can still buy it in every shop you go to. There's spam or different kinds of lunch meat, and
Yep.
I mean, every once in a while, I do enjoy it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's great. Yeah.
Yeah, we eat it once in a while too. Like, just because we live right there doesn't mean we eat it all the time. But yeah, I mean, a couple times a year we slice it up and fry it with some pancakes or something. It's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. With pancakes, right? So savory pancakes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Great.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Pleasure. Nice to talk to you.
To those listening, thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey. It is truly an honor. Please join the podcast newsletter by clicking on the link in the episode description to keep up with the latest episodes. Together, we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.